Well, thanks everyone for being here. We'll get it started with sort of quick rounds of intros in addition to what was just said. So maybe, well, we know your names, but talk to us a little bit about your firms, maybe kind of statement and how it relates to international investing, if it does. And also maybe to just learn a little bit more about you. Tell us something we wouldn't know by just stalking you on LinkedIn. Olivia, do you want to start?
Oh, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is ZhenFund. ZhenFund is China's largest early-stage venture fund, originally founded in partnership with Sequoia China. I think in the US, there's a very vibrant and diverse kind of seed market. And in China, early stages is much more consolidated. And so we've invested in over 600 companies, 4 of which have IPO'd in the US. And we started our Silicon Valley office in 2016, but we've been co-investing as a China strategic alongside SV Angel and 8VC and others from 2011. And a little bit about me, I was born in China, but came to the US when I was 3. I grew up in Ohio, actually, outside of Akron. And then I started my career at Credit Suisse in New York as a Chinese internet specialist. I got into Bitcoin in 2013, where I was one of the first members of the second largest Bitcoin exchange in China, second to Binance, which is called Huobi, also invested by Sequoia China. And then I joined ZhenFund first on the deal team in Beijing in 2014. And then I moved here to start our Silicon Valley office in 2016.
So what's interesting is Olivia is almost looking at the US as being foreign. And so I think that will bring an interesting perspective for investing in foreign entrepreneurs for us. Thank you. Niko, do you want to?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Niko Bonatsos. I'm a managing director at Unshackled. At our firm, we have a lot of capital, about $5 billion that we've raised over the years. We have nationwide presence, offices in New York, here in the Bay Area, and in Boston. And we are in the business of partnering with ridiculously ambitious founders who are building category-defining businesses. We don't check their passports. We don't care how they look like, where they came from, what they did before. All we care is, are they learning animals, and are they building the category-leading company of their space. We've invested in companies like Stripe, Airbnb, Snap, HubSpot, and many more over the years. And I've been with our firm for the last 8 years. Originally, in case you were wondering about my accent, I was made in Greece. I brought some, feta cheese here for anybody who's interested. And
for the lunch later.
Exactly, for the lunch later, spice it up a little bit. Grew up between Greece and the UK, lived in Tokyo, tried to do some research in Boston, and ended up here 9 years ago to go to Stanford. And Professor Tom Kosnick was one of my professors, so excited to see you here, Tom, today. And the last 8 years have been with our firm, so very excited to be investing in immigrants because I don't know any better.
That's a good reason. Manan?
So I'm Manan Mehta. I'm one of the founding partners of Unshackled Ventures. We are a very early stage venture fund designed specifically for immigrant entrepreneurs. And what I mean by that is we are unafraid to lead. We've led 90% of our early stage investments. We have a structure that can sponsor visa holders. So we started the firm about 4 years ago in concept, made our first investment 3 years ago, and have now sponsored over 40 visas in the last 2.5 years across obviously 2 distinct administrations in the United States, the Obama administration and the Trump administration. We've been fortunate to have 100% approval across the board. And so one of the major parts that we focus on is how do you remove bottlenecks and obstacles for the best immigrant entrepreneurs. And from a thesis and investing perspective, we really do enjoy the harder the technology, the more likely we are to get excited by it. We aren't afraid of being earlier than anybody else, and I mean by that is we want to find a technology that will hit a market inflection in the next 1 or 2 years. If it's obvious to Niko, then it's probably too late for us. He should be investing, not us, right? And so we tend to be a little bit more of a contrarian in our view, and we've been fortunate to have founders from now 16 different countries of birth. And we are now investing out of our second fund, targeting a $25 to $35 million size. And we are hoping to expand what we do.
Great. So maybe staying with you, Manan. Why did you start with the thesis of foreign entrepreneurs, and how is that playing out, both in terms of the good and the ugly? What are the risks and what are the benefits of doing that?
So for me, my personal background, I'm actually born and raised here in Silicon Valley.
Where's the accent from?
Huh?
Where's the accent from?
There's no accent. It's just American.
Is it Californian accent?
Yes.
No?
Good old Bay Area accent. So I'm the son of immigrants. I'm the son of parents that came in the 1970s and pursued that so-called American dream. And for me, when I started my first company about 5 years ago, it wasn't surprising that I did it with an immigrant co-founder. Little did I know if that you're on an H-1B visa in the United States, you had to have an employer. And that employer oftentimes can't be your own startup for obvious reasons. And so 9 months into that journey, I realized that there was an incredibly large population of immigrant talent, either US educated or US employed, that was shackled. They weren't able to leave their full-time jobs or stay in the country and work on their business. And so Unshackled was really born out of personal experience. I asked a simple question, why? Why is the best talent trying to come to America, and why is the best talent not being served by America? And so we took it upon ourselves not to wait for political change or legislative change, and we built what we call is the privatized version of the Startup Visa Act. And so obviously with that comes a lot of good, the bad, and the ugly. The good has been our success rate and our ability to serve this population and really learn from them. The bad has been that you have a lot of emotional stress in the market right now. I think we can't discount that there's a lot of questions around the status of immigrants globally, not just the US today. And I think that comes with a lot of lack of education in the market, a lot of misinformation for a lot of immigrant founders. And I think that becomes ugly very quickly when people stop building their companies because they're worried about their status. And so what we take on personally is how do we extend this platform to as many people as possible? And just last week, I can say this, for the very first time, we've opened up our platform to any founders that have raised capital from any investor and said, we will provide the full immigration support to you. Our first company was a YC company that just got into the current batch. And to me, that is really furthering the mission. We have 4-year track record with DHS and DOL, Department of Labor, and we just want to make sure that we can keep on providing that to other venture funds and other founders.
That's awesome. Great. Olivia, so you're investing through your fund both in the US and in China. How do you see that as investing here as a foreign fund? And maybe you and I were talking a little bit about how you're seeing the makeup of your companies here as well.
Sure. I mean, it's a huge question. So it's interesting because on the other side, if you think about China as the main country, our founder started one of the first companies to IPO on the New York Stock Exchange from China. It's currently at $11 billion valuation. And one of the products actually sent the last 2 generations of Chinese students abroad. And so what we have done, and then there's also a movie about the founding of the company. That's a bestseller blockbuster movie in China. And so we've built out relationships with the Chinese communities at Stanford and Harvard, across the top schools and as well as the top tech companies. And when they come back to China, we often lead the angel or seed round. And in a way, they've been abroad for so many years, and then they come back to China. And oftentimes that immigrant mentality of going back to China is a competitive advantage, especially in sectors like enterprise SaaS, fintech, and the hardcore sciences. We've also invested in people who decided to stay in the US and start companies in the US, and that has been a huge drive for them, such as Everstring. We did the seed round and they had raised a $60 million Series C a few years back in enterprise SaaS. I guess a couple of stories would be one of the first deals I had done in 2014 and worked on was a guy named Tom Ding. He started a blockchain fundraising company in China. It later shut down, and now he's built out Dfinity, which is one of the layer 1 competitors to Ethereum, which Polychain Andreessen later led. And so Tom Ding grew up in China and went to college when he was 14. He graduated when he was 14, actually, from the top university in Shanghai, worked for eBay in Shanghai for a few years, and actually moved to the US because he wanted to build out this blockchain infrastructure and had a vision for it as early as 2013. And he knew he had to come to the US for that because the regulatory environment in Asia is too strict. So that is one kind of area where you see like this vision and you see like emerging global sectors where different countries are collaborating. And then we have seen immigrant kind of founders and international founders as well in biotech, where China's really pushing ahead with healthcare trials and hospital data access more quickly, but a lot of the best technology is in the US. So how can data collected abroad help empower US tech engines in biotech? And how can US technology help foster great companies globally? So these are two areas that we've thought about a lot and two specific examples that we've worked with. For us, it's a lot about kind of industry trends often drive like how founders should be working internationally.
Interesting. Very cool. Well, in our case, we like investing in immigrant founders because they frankly, like when they come here, they have so much to prove, and they go the extra mile. And they're not constrained by their legacy. And a lot of founders, when they're getting started to do something, especially if they're second, third time founders, they have a bunch of legacy in their heads, which is, their network, the way they did things before, all the previous, relationships that they had. And it's hard to unlearn all that stuff. Whereas, if you're a first timer, and if you're somebody, who just moved here, the only thing that you have is to work and be very focused. And inevitably, this constrains you and hopefully makes you think from first principles. So when we're thinking about investing in first-time founders, and most often they are the ones, who are creating the mega outcomes. Yeah. Having, the advantage of coming out of nowhere and grinding it out, going the extra mile is very, very powerful strategy to get going in the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, you see that in the numbers, right? 51% of the US unicorns have a foreign founder.
Yeah.
So that theory plays out. Because you mentioned founders here and say, Manan, you're obviously bring them here. Do you see sort of having the founding team move to the US or even to the Bay Area as a prerequisite for success or for your consideration of an investment?
It's not a prerequisite, for us, or I can't, point to numbers where if the whole team moved here, it was, more successful than others. But I have to say, when you invest in immigrant founders who are first-timers, if they have to manage 2 offices, the complexity inevitably is higher. So it needs to speak to, you need to gauge their ability to manage and be able to deal with a complex organization. So I've been on both sides. Invested in a team that got started in Germany. They had a really good idea that saw a lot of traction here in the US. Launched here, helped them build an office in New York. And then we couldn't figure out the culture between these 2 different offices, and it was a disaster, for the management team and the whole company, and ended up not working out. So it's always, a delicate, balance to figure out. What matters the most is like the level of ambition that the founders have. So if they really want to serve a worldwide audience, a massive market opportunity, and they see a lot of their customers in the early days being in the US or China, and they themselves go there to be closer to their customers, this speaks to their determination.
Okay. Olivia, do you see some of those sort of more Chinese and American companies? And do you have any views on whether they should base themselves here or there, or actually both, as you were saying about data exchanges and bringing markets one way or the other?
Yeah, I think Niko has brought up a great point. It's definitely more complex when you're managing 2 offices. For example, we see Chinese or American teams that want to expand in China, and we do require them to move to China for a while and really know China before we invest. And then in the US, I think determination is often shown by a willingness to just move everything and be totally involved in the geography that you're working in. And then I had brought up blockchain and biotech because those are two potential exceptions where it may work to your benefit if you have an R&D lab in the US and then you're working in China like before the Series B or before the Series C. Oftentimes it's great to capture a home market for a while before going abroad, but for hardware, for blockchain, for some areas, it might be worth considering earlier if you can get an engineering team with a specific know-how or with a specific cost center in a different country, but only if you know that country really well. And we also think about diversity. I think the Valley thinks a lot about diversity in terms of, the white male venture capitalist or the white male engineer, but from a Chinese fund perspective, we also think, Chinese entrepreneurs or immigrant entrepreneurs actually need to have a local Valley founder or a local founder from their jurisdiction. So diversity in that principle kind of applies wherever you go.
Yeah, that's a very important topic. With a lot of immigrant founders, when you invest in them and they have a core team that it's folks from their own country, they need to constrain their approach to recruiting. Because for person number 5, if they also, go back to the easy option, which is to just hire somebody else from their home country, then before you know it, you have like 15 people, they all look alike. And when you're interviewing for person number 16, and no wonder why it's really, really hard to compel somebody to come and join you.
Yeah, you've recreated that country here.
Exactly.
Interesting. Speaking of countries, maybe, my secrets are France and Canada because great engineering talent and a lot of government subsidies for R&D, so it makes for a great startup land. Manan, do you have any place where you particularly like to connect with or invest in?
So when you look at our portfolio, you have all 6 continents covered. I recognize there's 7. I'm not going to get to the 7th. And you have also now 17 countries of birth, I think. And the reality for us is that we don't source globally. I can't source out of 7 billion people. I'm a small fund, I have to stay focused, but we source domestically. So oftentimes we spend a lot of time at universities. So we have nearly 50 partnerships now with universities across the country, which I've kind of coined this, that I think it's our generation's Ellis Island, our university system. These are oftentimes immigrants that have who walk through the hallways of our US education system, emboldened with the American spirit and the American dream, and it's the private sector's job to catch them. And then you add on top of that all the accelerators and incubators that are doing a great job of attracting global talent and filtering them, and then you add on top of the corporate jobs that they come for. There's a lot of people, nearly 1.4 million high-skilled immigrants that we know of, that are in this country today, and at the margin, I will say this, they are more entrepreneurial than a native-born person because they left their home country.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think that goes down to the fact that there's a stronger adversity muscle to withstand and tolerate the challenges you're going to face as an entrepreneur. It is not that glorifying. I mean, what TechCrunch makes it sound like oftentimes is that it's so easy, but it is hard. And I think everyone here will talk about just how hard it is as an investor to see certain companies struggling. They shouldn't be, but they are going to no matter what. And I think it comes down to the people and that adversity muscle, that grit. And so for us, we tend to put a filter really down on not what university you went to or what job you're working at. I think that kind of traps into this pattern recognition that fails venture returns, especially when you say the biggest returns in venture are the outliers that are the exceptions. So how does pattern recognition work then? It doesn't make sense to me. And so what we look for
maybe
is
that's a pattern, right?
Huh?
Like, do not pay attention to the pattern recognition.
I think you talked about this. You've written a few times about this as well. And I love what Niko writes because it actually is a later stage investor talking about what a lot of early stage investors should be thinking about. Yep. But overall, I think our focus is much more on what is the distance you've traveled to start your company? Can I learn about that? And then can I invest in you to eliminate the bottlenecks you're facing today, one of which is immigration?
Got it. Do you guys want to follow up on either your favorite countries? And also one of our question that Manan started for the audience is also what he looks for in a founder, right? Grit very clearly comes to the forefront. What are you guys looking at in founders from those special countries or not?
Olivia, do you want to go?
I think, as we had iterated before, diversity. No matter where you go, having a diverse team from day one and that hunger and authenticity to what you are doing is really important.
Yeah, so for us, not very dissimilar to what you just said, ability to learn really quickly, treat every meeting, decision as a learning opportunity, because when you're getting started, you may not know much about your space or your business, but 4 years later, you have to be a world-class domain expert. So when we put you in the room with a Fortune 500 CEO in your sector, that person would be intimidated. So when we had the Stripe founders meet with our now partner, Ken Chenault, who was back then the CEO of Amex, Ken was like, oh my God, I've been in payments for my entire career. You two moved here from Ireland, and in 4 years, you know so much about my industry. So learning ability is number one. Number two is some people call it authenticity, others paranoia, a deeper calling to do what you're trying to do. Because starting a company is a crazy thing, and there's going to be so many ups and downs, and like every week, there's something like my co-founder said that to me, the CTO is going to quit, we're going to lose our biggest customer, the VP of engineering is sleeping with the general counsel. There's always, something going on. So you have to go back.
What company? Yeah, exactly. What companies do you invest in?
Yeah, go and check out my portfolio to see what I'm talking about. Right? So there's always, something going on. So you have to go back to like that mental node that drives you to go the extra mile and makes you not to give up, essentially. And then the third point that we're looking for is insane ambition, because we're in the business, and the venture business is such that can only make the math work out if it produces a huge outcome. So level of ambition matters a lot, and you see that with the entrepreneurs who are building the iconic companies.
How do you measure that or think about that?
It's from all the stuff that the founders, are saying to us, the stuff they've done before. Like if they left their home country, that's a big statement. If they left, like a good, stable job and career they had before, that's another statement. If they've gone into credit card debt to do what they're doing is another one. Like the way they're making their product decisions, setting up everything for the long run. They're doing something very different than anybody else, and most of the folks in their next of kin or friends would think of them as crazy, right? Like these are some of the proxies. Or when they come to us and they want to raise, like a bunch of money, they want to hire the most unbelievable people. This speaks to the ambition.
Yep.
Like most recently, like I ended up investing in somebody who moved here from his home country to build a company that can try to reinvent a very boring industry. He did that because in his home country he had signed a non-compete with his former employer, and he couldn't, do that. So he decided to leave his cushy life and move here to do that.
Yeah, I think ultimately it comes down to a founder's willingness to make their life harder. And when they willingly do that, I think investors tend to take notice. It gives you that extra nudge across a positive decision or a negative decision that you probably need. Because at the end of the day, diligence will give you a set of information that everyone can equally understand. But it's understanding the human in the company. And I think for us, we actually discern between entrepreneurs and founders. And for us, we like entrepreneurs because what that doesn't mean to me is that you're necessarily a domain expert, but it means you are a problem solver. And Niko touched on the fact that how fast the Stripe brothers were able to learn payment industry in 4 years. They had no experience really in the industry. They just came in and said, we can solve problems by making it a single snippet of code that everyone could use. And in 4 years, they come out probably knowing more than most major executives at the major banks. That is an intangible that takes time for an investor to learn. And I would advise a lot of immigrant entrepreneurs to figure out ways in your pitch to articulate that you are an entrepreneur, you are a problem solver, that you are comfortable with the uncomfortable, and that you know you don't have all the answers, because if you did, you'd be in a different stratosphere. But that's my one advice to a lot of founders is humility is great. We love it. I think immigrant entrepreneurs as a whole are very humble. I literally asked them to brag in my pitch meetings. I'm like, I need to know why you are so confident. Because you had to learn what they're willing to do.
Yep.
Yeah. One of the companies we had invested in is called VIP Kid. It's one of the top global ed tech companies. I think the last round was like valued them at 1.6 billion. It's this woman in China who hasn't really studied abroad much, isn't from like a very large tech company, and she's brought on tens of thousands of American teachers online doing live stream with Asian students. And it's like the fastest growing ed tech company. And the sheer vision of like a woman in China who's able to provide jobs to like 30,000 American people and build a top class ed tech company is like insane. And I think now, you know, you've got Facebook, Facebook, Google, Amazon in the US, you've got Alibaba, Baidu, and Tencent in China. Just to be able to create a new platform, given the environment, you really have to have that hunger. Like in China, there's a company called Toutiao, which is sucking up talent from Alibaba, Tencent, and Baidu. You know, people say, and for us, we experience some of these Chinese founders, like it's possible to get tens of millions in monthly revenue within the first year in China, and you can scale to 2 billion in valuation given the market and the population.
That's a seed round valuation, right?
It's like seed will do like 5 to 10 million USD, and then you know they'll do 3 rounds of fundraising in a year and just scale given just the market. You can feel it in the room sometimes as well. You can feel it the way they answer your questions, the way they ask you questions, the way they speak and iterate as you go in and build the relationship. I think there's a lot to be said about being in the room and being really present. Too.
Great. Maybe switching gear a little bit for the audience, one of the things that came in our conversations before we came today was the importance of having the right advisors and the right people around your team, especially as you're a foreign entrepreneur. So given the Founders Embassy program and people in the room, I would love to hear a little bit how you're thinking about your own advisors, and maybe also say how a founder who's coming to the US should think about this, and even if you have examples from your portfolio, even better.
So for us, we have a very simple philosophy on this. The difference between success and failure is oftentimes the right people at the right stage. And that to me goes beyond the founders. And so one of the kind of big benefits of doing what we've done in the political environment has become very binary on those that want to help immigrants and those that don't. That is an entrepreneur's dream, because when there's a binary outcome, you know how to operate. Gray is hard. And so what we've been able to do is, you know, we're very fortunate to be backed by some of the more influential families, and you can read about that. But more behind that is there's a lot of industry operators, like COOs of Airbnb, founders of NerdWallet, CTOs of Cisco. These are people that are raising their hand and said, I will help immigrants succeed faster. And so for us, when we look at this network of our investors and their friends, we've actually mapped out about 2,000 people that we have a direct link to, mapped them out based upon industry expertise, business influence, stage of help, and willingness to help. And that allows us to effectively say, no matter what, if you're doing a plant-based protein, or you're doing driverless trucking, or you're doing radar for senior living facilities, it doesn't matter, we can find people that can help you. And the one thing I've recognized is that I love about this population that we invest in is that they're very coachable. And when you're coachable, people want to spend time with you. And so that to me is the delta between that success and failure, because as a first-time entrepreneur, especially when you're trying to do enterprise sales, good luck getting that first customer close without somebody having that relationship, making that introduction, so that all your technical knowledge and your product knowledge can actually now articulate itself into customer revenue. That is the difference. And so we spent a lot of time on this. We've been very fortunate to have a wide network, but we're never stopped building it. So that's our approach.
Sure. So like when you arrive here, you got to take advantage of the place. And what's amazing about Silicon Valley and the ethos is that people want to pay it forward, and they genuinely, take meetings with strangers. So if you're an immigrant founder who just moved here, you got to take advantage of this unique opportunity that this fantastic ecosystem provides. And frankly, being on the investor side, it's a great proxy for us to evaluate who are the people who would go the extra mile, who are the people who are good networkers, who are the people who don't compromise for shooting, for the best advisors, out there possible. And it's a great hack if you're a founder who just came here. You're out of network, you don't know anybody. But since you probably are ridiculously passionate about what you're doing, it's not that hard to convince one person who is high quality and can connect you with everybody else. Like if you can't do that, like if you can't convince one person who is well networked and can introduce you to all the investors you need, or the press, or a few high quality VP of marketing folks, why are you in business? So that's something we want to see. And I remember when I arrived here in 2009, I was a graduate student at Stanford, good calling card. I was cold emailing Elon Musk and a bunch of people, and a lot of them were taking meetings with us. So if I could do it, and I was nobody, I can't see a reason why folks today cannot do that. There's so many people here who want to pay it forward, as Manan said before.
They really wanted to try the feta cheese as well, right?
Probably.
Luzo, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think Manan and Niko had made great points. Having practiced venture capital in China and have been part of the community in China and now a part of the Valley, I can say, China still really looks to the Valley and the literature and the dialogue as it's building out and continues to build out its tech ecosystem. The giving back culture and the openness to immigration, even despite all of the challenges, we have people who are fighting. It makes the Valley unique, and it is really important to take advantage of it definitely. So
yeah. So what I would say, as somebody who just moved here, is planning to move here, you have to be really good at your cold emailing skills.
Yep.
And you have nothing to lose, honestly. The worst thing that can happen is you can be ignored, which is not that bad.
Status quo.
At the end of the day, it's not really that bad. And as far as I'm concerned, my most recent investment, Series A stage, really early stage investment, that founder emailed me a year ago, pretty much to the day. He said, hey, I just moved here. I've read about you. Want to come and pitch you. And I met him. He was just getting started. Helped him introduce some people. Didn't invest, probably a mistake. Raised the seed round from amazing folks because he found one good advisor who was a notable entrepreneur, and that person took a leap of faith and connected him. And then we kept in touch, and a few months later, we ended up investing. So there is a lot of value, being on the receiving end. If you've just done it once, when somebody cold emailed you, and you invested in that person, or you make great friends with, or you recruited a person for a portfolio company, you'll never forget, to always see what comes in, and if it's a value, why not?
And I think you have to remember, for all those that are looking to kind of come to Silicon Valley, the one truth I will share with you is that there's a lot of inside baseball being played. There's a lot of insider information being shared. A lot of people are talking about companies to invest in within their influence circles. Right or wrong is a separate discussion, but that is just where we are today. And so one of the things that we do as an early stage investor is recognize that, and we strongly encourage our founders and try to help plug them into those influence circles because they are willing to help. And that may actually mean that they want to invest alongside of us, be a co-investor. If you look at a lot of the Sequoia and Lightspeed Scouts, that's their job, to find early stage funds that they can invest align with and then help. That's why we try to get multiple companies into YC. We now have 3. So we're pre-YC, get 3 there. That gives them the amplification that little nudge that they need. It doesn't guarantee success, let's not get confused by that, but it does help, right? It helps somebody that it doesn't really have a great notable resume in the US, doesn't have that network, and now puts them into a position of saying, hey, now everyone gets to look at me, gives them a shot. And so I think that's the one piece that I have come to appreciate more and more as a venture capitalist is, if I'm going to be most helpful, it actually has to be helpful in terms of building that influence circle.
Interesting. Just on that point, as a quick tip, sorry, French accent coming again. There's a couple of tools now public. One is called Angel, AINGEL, and one NFX just released today that actually helps startups evaluate which ones are the VCs that are more likely to match with them. So it's probably a great way to start your cold calling or cold emailing and tracking, because it's becoming easier to figure out who are potential good fits for you. With a few minutes left, maybe two last questions. We've talked a lot about advice, but if founders in the room have to take one thing, in addition to move here, cold emailing, and finding influencers, what's the one thing they can do to either come here, change their business, or change their thinking about being in a startup and making that successful? And then, different question, but to give a bit of inspiration to everybody in the room, which is the foreign-founded company that you would have loved to invest in? It can be anything you want.
There's so many.
I know that's
Just pick
so
one.
many.
Can I say Google?
You can say Google.
Uber? Garrett?
Olivia, do you want to start? Advising one company you would have loved to invest in?
Sure. I mean, starting a company is a very personal experience, and even though there have been many immigrants who have succeeded and established industries to tackle, I think all the time people are just blazing their own paths, and there's such an interdisciplinary nature of new sectors and platforms developing. So it's really hard to get advice in one place or know this is the right way. I think you can get all the advice in the world, an ability to be really genuine, to really be honest with yourself, with your strengths and weaknesses. Where are you better at? Where are you worse at? Which country would you do better at? Which country would you do worse at? Is really important. I mean, yeah, there are so many amazing companies. Toutiao is such a force in China. You've got Wish, you've got, Musically. I love Biotech, so I love Ginkgo and Zymergen. Yeah.
That's a good list.
It's a good list, yeah. I saw Wish.com early on. I didn't get
wow.
it, and then I realized, price, really matters, which is something always to remember, because I couldn't relate as a potential customer. So that's, the break the pattern recognition, learning that I had from that meeting. Like I met the Wish.com founders, they couldn't care less about their customers, their products were like crap, but they were like, oh, price matters. If it's the cheapest option out there, somebody will buy them. And I clearly missed the memo on that one. So advice for founders coming here, always go back and try to revise your initial hypothesis. So when you're a founder who's just getting started on something, you're insanely passionate, you want to be go, you have some unique insights, but then often if you don't have the experience, you don't go back every month or so to truly see if these initial insights are still standing, true. So you may be executing 6 months in, but based on a plan that you put together 6 months, in the past, and the market has changed, the competitive landscape has changed, all the new information that came in might have not, made it into your product. So always going back and revising your plan and proof testing it with the market and what you hear from your customers is probably, the piece of advice I would give to passionate founders. But all that said, the only reason why companies, fail is because they run out of cash. There's no other reason. So if you can raise, money along the way, that's a powerful skill to develop.
I'll actually build on what Niko said, and this is probably the most common reason why we don't end up investing in a company, and that's a lack of customer discovery work before you start your company. And what I mean by that is there's 3 questions we'll typically ask. How much is a customer willing to pay you? What's the most they're willing to pay you? And at what point they tell you to F off, I'm not going to pay you, pardon my language. And the reason is before you start a company, I believe that you should have a hypothesis at minimum around what pain point are you solving, What's your MVP solution? Who does your customer look like? Are they large SMBs or are they large enterprises or small SMBs? What's the sales cycle going to look like? And ultimately, who do you have to hire and how much money do you need? I'm not saying those are going to change. Those aren't going to change. They will change. But I think before you start your company, you should know if you're building a product that you're going to charge $99 a month, but it's going to be sold to large enterprises, it's going to take you 9 months to close that deal, you're probably not going to be venture fundable after this, if even this. And so that customer discovery work is really important, and I think it helps alleviate a lot of false starts and makes you hone in on the value proposition a little bit faster.
Awesome.
What advice would you have?
One that I've been playing a lot with is around weekly goals and essentially setting up weekly goals, probably 3 to 5. They don't have to be lofty goals, just the consistency you find in the very early stages, the consistency of teams that actually set goals weekly and hit them is a very strong predictor of their ability to success. So don't know yet if it's correlation or causation, but it's probably a good discipline to have anyways. All right. Two companies you wish you had invested in?
Wish.com, right? You know, wish to
There
have
we go.
invested, wish.com.
All
Just
right.
like that.
I'll say, had I known App Dynamics, Jyoti Bansal, primarily because he had to wait for his green card to start his company. He was on an H-1B and he couldn't do it until he got his green card.
Maybe that's why she got the timing right to get started.
Yeah.
8 years he had to wait.
Yeah, every obstacle, right?
It worked.
All right. Thanks very much.
Cool. Thank you.